and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Society of Geneva. We seek to meet you wherever you are on your journey and invite you to be part of this congregation in which we draw wisdom from all of the world's religions, balanced with the insights of modern science. We seek to build a diverse, beloved community within even our virtual walls, and we hope to inspire and accompany one another as we act for peace and justice in our larger world. When I was in seminary, we were taught this mantra, quote, act yourself into new ways of thinking. It's catchy and surprising. It's an inversion, if you will. And that makes it a Paraprostokian. Have you heard of those? Paraprostokian. It means beyond expectation. These are basically one-liners that don't quite go the way that you think they will. For example, you are never too old to learn something stupid. My days of not taking you seriously are coming to a middle. I had a perfectly wonderful evening, but this wasn't it. If I agreed with you, we'd both be wrong. I used to be indecisive. Now I'm not so sure. Going to church doesn't make you a Christian any more than standing in a garage makes you a car. There are a zillion of these. These are the favorite jokes and the joke forms of Oscar Wilde, Groucho Marx, Stephen Wright, and Winston Churchill. My quote from school probably originated as one of these clever twists, derived from something, at least so, quote, investigator.com says, it is easier to act yourself into right thinking than to think yourself into right acting. This quote is something I have mentioned before. Where I picked it up was the work of Father Gustavo Gutierrez, the South American Catholic priest who, I'd argue, invented Liberation Theology. You may have heard of Liberation Theology as it's become quite popular in UU circles of late, and more broadly, ever since the Vatican II Council in the mid-1960s. Father Gutierrez, who was writing on behalf of the desperately poor, was fond of saying that practice ought to precede theory. Practice ought to precede theory. Orthopraxy, right practice, comes before right beliefs, orthodoxy. It's not necessarily funny, but it is intuitive, right? It kind of goes like this or translates like this. We don't need to get the words right just to know that letting children go hungry is just wrong. We don't need to wait for the end of the study to know that racism ends the lives of youths in Chicago. Act now, theorize later. That was the admonishment of a priest who clearly had had it with all of the talking, all of the debates, all of the managerial forms and proposals and approvals and oversight, all of the studies, all of the blue ribbon panels, all of the not doing anything that always precedes the possibility of the doing of anything. And I suspect most of you would agree he has a point. Act yourself into new ways of thinking. This is interesting, but it's worth kind of pausing and noting that it sits at odds with Martin Luther, at least. Martin Luther, who concluded several hundred years ago that orthopraxy is, well, irrelevant. Luther preached sola fide, Latin for by faith alone. What mattered in here mattered way more than out there. Working on the in here was not an excuse to avoid the work out there, but for Luther, good works only emerge from right beliefs. Right action flows from the well of faith before it rolls down like water and rushes like a mighty stream. If I don't get in here sorted out first, then whatever I do out there can and probably will do more harm than good. That is doing good without proper orientation. like a compass, is likely to be by accident. And caveats aside, this is kind of what Luther believed. This tension between inner and outer, between action and thought, between orthopraxy and orthodoxy, this is kind of where I want to play today. But first, let's do our thing. So with the mics still muted, I'm going to remove the Zoom spotlight. Boop. And what I want you to do is go to your computer screens and hit that button in the upper right-hand corner of the Zoom screen that says View. And then we'll pull that down to Gallery. And you'll know because all of a sudden we'll be playing Hollywood Squares. Now, looking at all of these faces, your community, and in the spirit of our friend, the Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III of Trinity Church here in Chicago, I want you to pick one of those squares. Just turn to it virtually, if you will, and say, neighbor, oh neighbor, we are all meant to shine. Amen. Thank you. Here we go. Spotlight me back till we go. Okay. So before we return to liberation theology, I want to take a turn, if you will, and explore some 3rd century Christianity. I know, just the thing for an early January sermon. It's related, I promise. So, Christianity. Way back when, in the years before Emperor Constantine got annoyed with his adopted church, being Christian did not mean what it means today. Back then, it could mean a lot of different things. You could be a Christian and believe in one God. You might instead believe in 2 or 3 or 32 or thousands. You might believe that God created the earth or some other God created earth. You might believe in the resurrection of the body or find that idea completely repellent. Before the Council of Nicaea, Christianity was apparently a wild west of religious belief. What it meant to be Christian really depended on where you were. Why that was a problem for Constantine is a sermon for another day, but today I want to talk about at least one of these quote-unquote lost Christianities, the variant that drew heavily on the teachings of Greek philosophers like Plato. Now, one of those groups we tend to, at least now, call the Gnostics, Gnostic with a G, the opposite of agnostic. When it came to the now Orthodox Christian teaching that at the end of time, God will raise the dead in our actual bodies before judging us for our sins, Gnostics thought this was silly. They rejected this because they said, obviously, the earthly body was a trap, that the material world was an illusion. Earth was, in fact, hell, a prison that was created by a vengeful and stupid deity, and not the God of the Trinity, but some other God. And yeah, this was pretty common. Common enough that the Nicene Creed was written so it could exclude it. Anyway, what mattered for the Gnostic was what was inside of us. That divine spark, a tiny bit of godhood that was hidden away in our body. In fact, it was that spark, that light meant to shine, that was our true self. The spark that was a gift from God. It meant that we were, in fact, God, at least pieces of God, shards, sparks. It really depends on which Gnostic group we're talking about. But the point is, the body was a prison for that bit of the holy whose light has been hidden from sight. For them, this was the truth of Christianity, the good news. Uncovering this truth was the goal of true humans because it was this knowledge, gnosis is the Greek word for awareness or knowledge. This experience of gnosis was saving. For the Gnostics, right belief leads to salvation, and salvation meant going home. All you had to do was know. It was not easy, but all you had to do was know. Knowing then meant reunification with divinity. That was the afterlife. The outer world was evil, the inner world, the inner truth, the one inner truth, this one inner truth was all that mattered. And I want to confess, I'm sympathetic. This is cool. Whether it's heresy or not, it's very interesting, the psychology of this. But the secret teachings, these hidden truths, human transcendence, divine exaltation, this stuff is really amazing. It makes Dan Brown novels tame by comparison. In the ancient Near East, this was the world of mystery cults. Mystery cults of Demeter and Isis, Mithra, Zeus, and many others. And these groups had millions of devotees all over the Roman Empire. The Freemasons, the Golden Dawn, and modern paganism all model themselves, to some extent, after these ancient mystery traditions, hidden lights, magic, and wonder. It is a mystery to scholars why Buddhism tracks so neatly, however. It's quite possible that Alexander's great conquest imported quite a bit more from India than spices, but no one really knows for sure. What we do know is that Buddhism, at least in some version, also celebrates going inward over going outward. That in here comes before out there. That loving kindness must start with the self before it can ever become love for neighbor. That the great goal of human life is an intimate journey, one of self-discovery, and that salvation, well, salvation of a sort, that comes from a sort of gnosis. The practice of Buddhism, the praxis, the orthopraxy of Buddhism is just this: work, actions, doings all lead to an uncovering, a revelation, an embrace of a truth that we all carry deep within us. And this brings me back to liberation theology. We've already talked about how liberation theology lifts up practice over theory, which many of you may have heard as deeds over creeds. As a UU, that may sound very familiar. And if so, my hope is that the other half of liberation theology will also. Because here we have to talk about the journey toward inherent worth and dignity. It goes like this. Marginalized people in the United States have a long history of suffering oppression, being pushed down, pushed aside, passed over, hurt, harmed, hated, held back, and murdered. We can get all misty-eyed if we must, but it's a fact. We Americans have a long history of dehumanizing our fellow human beings. You could say we're really good at it. Psychologically, dehumanization is not something you just shake off, though. For liberation to be real and true and good and lasting, at least according to liberation theology, liberation must come from within, because that's where it lives. Marginalized people, oppressed by direct action, by social system, by long history, they must do their own work. And this can't be underlined enough. Liberation is not a job for the outsider. Liberation is always an inside job. This is a hard one to wrap our heads around. It's a hard truth. But it's one that has some profound implications for activism and social justice. I can help, namely by dismantling systems of oppression that dehumanize the marginalized. But liberation is not something I can give anyone else. Liberation only begins with the discovery, the rediscovery of a hidden inner truth. maybe an embrace of the divine spark, the hidden light, the God within, a fundamental self-recognition that, yes, I am worthy. If you don't believe it, if you don't embrace it, if that gnosis remains unavailable to you, then all of my actions are just sound and fury, signifying nothing. Now, I'm not saying that liberation theology is Gnosticism reborn or that Buddhism is the source material for both. The truth is out there. Today, what I want to notice is that there is a really long history of profound change-making that doesn't start with us just rushing out and doing stuff, which is important because this is the time of year when we all rush out and try and do stuff. So let's end today with some bad habits. And by that, I mean our beating ourselves up about our New Year's resolutions. Maybe you have a new set of resolutions, freshly minted, if you will. Something about eating less, moving more, doing justice, making peace. The details don't really matter. I'm sure they are all manner of good things. And we believe that doing these things will make us happier, healthier, better people. And this kind of doing is very much in that spirit of acting ourselves into new ways of thinking, isn't it? It's all good and fun, and hopefully it will be more than that. To that end, though, I want to draw a line between making a resolution and setting an intention. I want to suggest that setting an intention can be different and perhaps should be different. Something that's different enough that maybe it survives longer than our annual resolutions might. And no, I don't mean setting an intention as a way of, quote, manifesting anything. This isn't magic. All I'm saying is that for change to be real and true and good and lasting, it must come from within, because that's where it lives. Resolutions are out there, but intentions are in here. Resolutions are about behavior. Intentions are about character. You could say resolutions are like plans to go sailing, and intentions are like not sailing without a compass. Intention matters. Your intent, your hopes, your beliefs, your desires, your dreams, all of that matters. And I say that knowing that it's a pop culture cliche to say that, quote, it's not what you do underneath. It's not what you are underneath. It's what you do that defines you. I think I pulled that from Batman. I say that knowing, and as we've already explored, Buddhism, Gnosticism, Lutheranism, and liberation theology may disagree with you. You are more than your actions, a lot more. And setting an intention is more than changing some behaviors. Setting an intention is my attempt at changing me. Here are some of my past intentions. Be present. Love wastefully. Be vulnerable. Thich Nhat Hanh, John Shelby Spong, and Brene Brown each have a lot to say about these particular intentions. I have books and I can make recommendations. But I still think these are pretty good intentions to set. Maybe you have some. So this year, maybe we do it a little different. Maybe we see the key to growth and satisfaction and meaningfulness as not guilting ourselves into doing things that we hope will transmogrify us into better people simply by us doing them. Maybe we stop trying to sum up our value as the sum of our action. Maybe we let go of the shame that comes when we come up short. If you're looking, if you're curious, and if you want to explore this, I believe you can start by asking not, who do I want to be? Though that's an excellent question. And instead, maybe, who am I really? And maybe that means we pull a page out of a very old book. Maybe we spend some time on ourselves, not by adding to the clutter and the accretions and the gunk and the actions and the expectations that the world is asking of us and is dumping on us, but instead maybe clearing some of that away. Maybe we can uncover and perhaps better recover the hidden light that's inside each of us, a hidden light that's been clouded, covered, dimmed, obscured by a world full of things and aimless actions. Remember, in all of our doing, all of our seeking after truth and goodness, that maybe this was what we have always carried, a hidden truth, a hidden light, but one that can set us free. And that sounds like an intention worth setting to me. Which brings me to my closing quote from author and presidential hopeful Marianne Williamson, who I'm sure you've heard before, so follow along. She wrote, quote, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Happy New Year. Amen and blessed be. And as we prepare to leave this place, continue your journey in love. Care for one another and care for this, our earth. Do justice and make peace, yes. And as you go, know that whatever taste or touch you've had in this time and virtual place of hope, joy, love, peace, of epiphany, intention, revelation of hidden light, that goes with you out into the world. We are different for having spent this time together. So remember, live boldly and with thanksgiving.